They were marched into the desert just before sunset, when the sky turned a deep, burning orange and the land seemed endless and unforgiving. No one from the tribe looked at them directly. There were no goodbyes, no final words, only silence heavy with judgment. The accusation against them had never been clearly spoken, only implied in whispers. Their husbands had died. And somehow that was enough to make them dangerous, unlucky, a burden the tribe did not want to carry. The older of the two walked with steady steps, her face calm, almost unreadable. Inside, she felt the weight of everything she had lost, but she refused to let it show. The younger one struggled to keep up, her movements uncertain, her breathing uneven. Fear clung to her, but she bit it back, determined not to break in front of those who had already decided her worth. As the tribe disappeared behind them, the truth became impossible to ignore. This was not a temporary punishment. They had not been sent away to survive. They had been sent away to vanish. The desert stretched out in every direction, empty and silent, as if it had swallowed countless others before them. The heat still lingered in the air, even as the sun began to fall. Every step forward felt heavier, not just because of the journey ahead, but because there was no path leading back. Then, as darkness slowly took over and the last light faded from the horizon, a sound broke through the stillness. Distant, steady, unmistakable, hoofbeats. Not rushed, not lost, but controlled. Someone was out there, moving with purpose, and they were not alone anymore. She remembered a time when her place in the tribe had felt certain, almost unshakable. She had been the wife of a respected warrior, a man known not just for his strength, but for his sense of fairness. People listened when he spoke. They stood a little straighter when he entered a space. And because of him, she had never questioned where she belonged. That certainty began to fade the day he didn't return. At first, there was sympathy. People came to her, offering quiet words, brief touches on the shoulder, shared grief. But it didn't last. The tone shifted in ways that were subtle enough to deny, yet clear enough to feel. Conversations would stop when she approached. Eyes lingered a second too long before turning away. It was as if her presence carried something, unspoken, something people didn't want near them. The younger widow had it worse. She had only been married a short time, her place in the tribe never fully rooted. Without a strong name to protect her, she became an easy target for quiet blame. Her sadness made her seem fragile, and fragility, in the eyes of others, looked too much like weakness. Looking back now, it became clear that their exile had not been sudden. It had been building in small, almost invisible moments, each glance, each whisper, each step of distance growing wider. Fear had been moving through the tribe long before they were cast out, and fear always needed somewhere to settle. They had simply been the easiest place to put it. The desert did not wait for them to adjust. By the second day, it had already begun to strip away whatever strength they thought they had left. The sun rose without mercy, pressing down on them until even breathing felt like effort. Their water was nearly gone, each sip measured, each decision about when to drink carrying quiet tension. The younger widow stumbled more often now, her steps dragged, her focus slipping as exhaustion crept in. Once she paused too long, staring at nothing, as if the emptiness around them had started to pull her in. The older one didn't scold her. She simply kept moving, expecting her to follow. Stopping meant risking everything. There were no clear paths, only endless stretches of sand and stone that all looked the same. Direction became guesswork, guided by distant shapes on the horizon that never seemed to get closer. The silence between them grew heavier, broken only by the sound of shifting ground beneath their feet and the dry wind that never fully stopped. When the storm came, it arrived without warning. The sky darkened in an instant, and the wind turned violent, throwing sand into the air so thick it erased the world around them. They dropped low, covering their faces, clinging to each other just to stay grounded. The air howled, drowning out every other sound, turning the moment into something chaotic and disorienting. It felt like it lasted forever. And then, just as suddenly, it was over. The air settled. The silence returned, but something had changed. The ground around them was marked, now disturbed in a way the storm couldn't explain. The older widow noticed it first. A pattern, subtle but deliberate. Footprints. Not theirs. Fresh. He didn't rush toward them. He didn't hide either. He simply appeared at the edge of their vision, as if he had always been there and they had only just noticed. A man on horseback, still and composed, watching them with a level of patience that felt deliberate. Both women tensed immediately. In a place like this, no one approached without a reason, and rarely a good one. The older widow stepped slightly in front, her posture straight despite the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't show fear. She just met his gaze, steady and unyielding. The man studied them for a long moment before speaking. "You don't look like you chose this road." His voice was calm, almost thoughtful, as if he were stating a simple observation rather than asking a question. Neither of them answered. Silence stretched between them, thick but controlled. The younger widow shifted slightly, her unease harder to hide, but she said nothing. The man swung himself down from his horse with unhurried ease. Every movement was measured, careful in a way that suggested experience rather than caution. He reached for something tied to his saddle and held it out, a small water canteen. The offer hung in the air. The older widow didn't move right away. Her eyes flicked from the canteen to his face, searching for something, intent, deception, weakness. Finding none she could clearly name, she hesitated just a moment longer. Then she stepped forward and took it, a small decision, but one that shifted the balance of the moment. The man gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them. "I've been following your trail," he said. "Long enough to know you shouldn't have made it this far." That alone was enough to raise questions. People didn't survive out here by accident, and no one followed strangers through the desert without purpose. The older widow handed the canteen to the younger one without breaking eye contact. "Then you already know we don't plan to stop," she replied quietly. A faint hint of something, respect perhaps, crossed the man's expression. "Good," he said, "because turning back wouldn't help you anyway." The words settled heavier than they should have, not just an observation, a certainty, and in that moment, it became clear. This man wasn't just a passerby, he knew something. They made camp a short distance away, where a cluster of rocks broke the wind just enough to make a small fire possible. No one spoke at first. The silence wasn't empty, it was cautious, each of them measuring the others without making it obvious. The younger widow drank slowly, her hands still unsteady, while the older one kept her attention on the man. Up close, he didn't look careless or cruel. There was something controlled about him, the kind of stillness that came from experience, not comfort. He was the one who finally broke the silence. "I know your tribe," he said, staring into the fire rather than at them. "Word travels, especially after a failed raid." The older widow's expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened. "Raids fail all the time," she replied. "Not like that one," he said quietly. That was enough to shift the air between them. He went on to explain piece by piece, never rushing, never dramatic. The attack that had taken their husbands' lives hadn't gone wrong by chance. It had been poorly planned, deliberately so, routes exposed, timing misjudged, decisions made that no experienced leader would allow. Someone had wanted it to fail. The younger widow looked confused, shaken by the idea, but the older one stayed still, letting the weight of it settle before reacting. It connected too easily with everything she had felt before the exile, the whispers, the distance, the quiet blame. They needed someone to carry the outcome, the man continued. Easier to blame misfortune than admit betrayal. The fire cracked softly between them. "And you?" The older widow asked. "Why tell us this?" For the first time, he looked directly at her. "Because I've been tracking the same problem," he said. Just from a different side. He didn't offer every detail, but he didn't need to. It was clear enough. Whatever had happened in that raid was part of something larger, something hidden inside the tribe. He leaned back slightly, his tone unchanged. "You can keep walking and hope the desert finishes what they started," he said. "Or you can go back and make them face what they tried to bury." The younger widow shook her head slightly, fear returning to her eyes. "Go back? After what they did?" The older widow didn't answer right away. Her gaze dropped briefly to the fire, then lifted again, steady and clear. "This wasn't just exile," she said. "It was removal." The man gave a small nod. "Exactly." Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Not uncertain, focused. "What do you want in return?" she asked. "Truth," he said simply, "and a chance to expose the one responsible." It was a dangerous offer. Returning meant facing the same people who had already cast them out. It meant stepping back into a place that had decided they didn't belong. But it also meant something else. Control. The older widow stood slowly, the decision already made before the movement finished. "We don't go back as we were," she said. The man watched her, waiting. "We go back knowing exactly what we're looking for." A faint, almost approving expression crossed his face. "That's the only way this works," he replied. The younger widow hesitated, then looked between them. Fear still there, but no longer stronger than everything else. Finally, she nodded. The fire burned lower as the three of them sat in quiet understanding. This was no longer just about surviving the desert. Now it was about returning with purpose and uncovering. the truth that had nearly erased them. They returned at first light, moving with intention rather than urgency. The desert no longer felt like a place of exile, it felt like distance. They had already conquered. By the time the tribe came into view, neither of the widows looked like someone who had been cast out to disappear. They walked straight in. Conversations stopped. Movement slowed. The same people who had once avoided their gaze now stared openly. Caught between disbelief and something harder to name, fear had shifted, but it hadn't vanished. It had simply changed direction. The older widow didn't wait to be questioned. She stepped forward into the center of the camp, her presence calm but unyielding. The younger one stood beside her, quieter but no longer uncertain. The outlaw remained at a distance near the edge, watching everything without drawing attention. At first, no one spoke. Then the older widow began. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with facts. She spoke of the raid, of the routes that had been exposed, of decisions that didn't make sense. Each detail was precise, controlled, impossible to dismiss as emotion. People listened, not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't ignore what they were hearing. Murmurs spread through the crowd. A few faces changed. Subtle, but enough. She let the silence build before continuing. This was not misfortune, she said. It was design. The words settled heavily. Someone stepped forward, a figure of authority, someone who had supported the decision to exile them. His expression was tight, controlled, but there was a flicker there now. Uncertainty. You speak without proof, he said. The older widow didn't raise her voice. I speak with memory, she replied, and with patterns you hope no one would question. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the gathered faces. You needed the raid to fail, she continued, and you needed someone to carry the blame after it did. The tension sharpened. The man's composure slipped, just slightly, but enough. Others noticed it too. The shift in him was small, but it broke something in the air. That was when the outlaw stepped forward. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. His presence alone drew attention, unfamiliar and unexpected. He spoke only a few words, adding details the widows could not. Movements tracked, patterns observed beyond the tribe's view. Together, it formed something complete, something undeniable. The truth moved through the crowd like a slow wave. No one shouted. No one argued, because there was nothing left to defend. The man at the center of it all said nothing now. His silence confirmed more than any denial could have. And in that silence, everything changed. The reaction did not come all at once. It moved slowly through the tribe, like something heavy settling into place. People avoided looking directly at the widows at first, as if unsure where they now stood in relation to them. The certainty that had once justified the exile was gone, replaced by an uneasy awareness of what had really been done. A few stepped back, creating distance. Not from the widows this time, but from the man who had been exposed. Others lowered their heads, the weight of quiet guilt showing in small, restrained movements. No one rushed to defend him. No one spoke in his favor. Authority, once unquestioned, began to unravel without a single command. The man at the center of it all stood still, his silence now stripped of control. Whatever power he had held depended on belief, and that belief had broken. Whether he would be cast out, removed, or simply left behind no longer mattered in the same way. His influence was already gone. The younger widow noticed the change first. The same people who had once dismissed her now could not meet her eyes, but she didn't seek their acknowledgement. She stood straighter, her presence no longer uncertain, no longer defined by their judgment. The older widow remained calm, watching everything without satisfaction. There was no victory in this moment, only clarity. What had been taken from them could not be restored by truth alone, but something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to ensure it would never happen the same way again. In the days that followed, the tribe slowly returned to its routines, but something fundamental had changed beneath the surface. The widows were no longer avoided, no longer whispered about, yet the space around them felt different, not hostile, but cautious, as if people no longer trusted their own judgments as easily as before. The older widow understood that respect had been restored, but trust was something else entirely. It could not be rebuilt by a single revelation, no matter how powerful. Too much had been broken in silence long before the truth was spoken aloud. The younger widow changed in quieter ways. She no longer looked to others for reassurance. The fear that once defined her had been replaced with something steadier, something self-contained. She had faced exile, survived it, and returned, not because she was allowed to, but because she chose to. The outlaw did not stay. One morning, he was simply gone, leaving no trace behind. No farewell, no acknowledgement. His role had ended the moment the truth came to light. The The older widow stood at the edge of the camp, watching the horizon where the desert began again. It no longer felt like a place of punishment. It felt like a reminder of what they had endured and what they had become because of it. She knew she could stay. Life here would continue, shaped by what had happened but still familiar in its structure. But she also knew she did not have to. When she turned away from the camp, the younger widow followed without hesitation. There was no need for words between them. Their path forward did not depend on the tribe anymore. They had been sent into the desert to be forgotten. Instead, they walked away from it by choice, carrying something far stronger than belonging. They carried certainty, and this time, their future would be decided by no one else.